Okay, so picture this. You just landed that dream job in Lisbon. Maybe you finally got into that Japanese university. Or perhaps you're even looking into a golden visa in Spain. Everything's clicking into place.
Mm-hmm.
And then, bam, you hit this bureaucratic hurdle you maybe didn't see coming.
Yeah.
The Apostilled FBI background check.
Yeah.
It sounds straightforward,
Yeah.
right? But getting this thing when you're not actually in the U.S. anymore, it can feel like, I don't know, trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded.
That's a perfect analogy, and that's exactly what we're going deep on today. Our mission really is to be your shortcut here, to untangle this whole process, getting and apostilling that FBI check, especially if you're a U.S. citizen living abroad.
Right.
It's, a surprisingly common challenge, but here's something interesting. Nearly 250,000 Americans manage to figure this puzzle out every single year.
Wow.
So yeah, if you're facing this, you are definitely not alone.
And our source material today, it's really packed with insights, isn't it? Looks like a pretty solid roadmap.
It is.
We're going to try and pull out the most important bits, the practical steps, and just cut through the noise to get you what you need to know.
Exactly. Because look, understanding this process, it isn't just about saving yourself a headache, although that's nice too.
Sure.
It actually puts you ahead of the game. Strategically, whether it's for work overseas, study, getting residency, knowing how to handle this specific piece of paperwork means you're not just hoping it works out.
You're making it happen.
You're actively making it happen. Yeah.
All right, let's unpack this then. Why the huge demand? What's fueling this explosion in needing these apostilled FBI checks right now? It feels like everyone's going global.
You're absolutely right. The numbers, they really paint a picture. We've seen, get this, a staggering 173% rise in U.S. residents working abroad just since 2020.
Wow, 173%. That's
huge. And it's not just a little trend. It's a fundamental shift in, how and where Americans are choosing to live and work. And that directly drives up the need for these background checks.
So beyond remote work, which is obviously big, what else is contributing? Are there specific types of moves happening or certain countries?
Yeah, remote work is definitely a big piece, but it's not the whole story. Think about the golden visa programs. Portugal alone, right? They approved over 3,000 investor visas in 2024.
Okay.
And our source says 82% of those required these apostilled FBI reports.
82%.
Mm-hmm. Then you've got student exchanges. Almost 70,000 U.S. students studied overseas in 2024. Most of them need this check for local police registration when they arrive. So it's truly global. It reflects changes in, lifestyle and economic opportunity.
So we've got remote work, investment, education. It really sounds like a perfect storm hitting this one document, doesn't it?
It really is. A perfect storm, all converging on the single federal document. And all that demand. It means the FBI's division that handles this, CJIS Criminal Justice Information Services, they processed 3.7 million of these identity history summary checks in fiscal 2024.
3.7 million.
An all-time high. Which just underscores why understanding how to do this from overseas, the whole remote apostille pipeline is, more critical than ever.
So, okay, volume is one thing. But for you, the person trying to get this done from, say, halfway across the world, what's the real fundamental hurdle? What's the core problem?
The core problem, it really boils down to the U.S. regulations themselves. They specifically demand a fresh report. The official name is Identity History Summary Check, and it needs that federal apostille stamp.
Right, the apostille.
So step by step it means, first, you've got to get your fingerprints properly onto an official FD 258 card.
Okay.
Then you submit that card, either through an FBI-approved channeler that's basically a private company allowed to fast-track submissions, or you send it directly to CJIS.
Mm-hmm.
Once the FBI generates the report, then you have to get that physical report mailed to the U.S. Department of State for the apostille.
Still not done.
Not yet. Finally, the State Department has to mail the sealed apostilled report back to a U.S. address. Then it can be forwarded to you overseas.
Wow. That sounds like just an incredible number of handoffs and potential delays.
It is, and that's the critical point. Every single mile that document travels, it's not just shipping time. It's a chance for delay. It's navigating separate processing queues at each stop.
Right.
A tiny hiccup at one stage, it can ripple outwards, causing significant delays, especially when you're crossing international borders and dealing with multiple government agencies. It's tricky. You really need a solid plan, a proven roadmap to keep things moving.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. If you can't just pop down to a lab in, Boston to get your fingerprints done,
yeah,
how do you actually do that? when you're thousands of miles away. That seems like the very first big roadblock.
It often is the biggest initial hurdle, yeah. But the good news is our sources point to 3 remote fingerprint options that actually work.
Okay, what are they?
Option 1, check with the U.S. Embassy or consulate police desk where you are. Most U.S. embassies will roll prints for citizens, usually by appointment.
Right.
Key things here. Schedule it online ahead of time. Bring your passport, obviously. And crucially, bring 2 blank FD 258 cards with you.
Why 2?
Just in case one gets smudged or there's an issue. And don't assume they'll have them. Consulates especially rarely stock these forms. You need to come prepared.
Got it. Preparation is key. Don't just show up empty-handed. What if an embassy isn't nearby or maybe not practical? What's option 2?
Option 2 is your local police department in the country you're currently in. Many countries that are part of the Hague Convention.
Right, the Apostille thing.
Exactly. Yeah. The treaty that simplifies document authentication, their police might be willing to print you on a U.S. FD 258 card. Big tip here. Definitely call ahead first. Some stations might even need you to bring a translator if you don't speak the local language fluently. And this is super important. Ask the officer signing it to use black ink only. And date it.
Black ink. Why is that so specific? Seems a bit random.
It's not random at all. It sounds quirky, but blue ink or other colors often don't scan well or meet the forensic standards the FBI uses for official records. Using the wrong ink is a surprisingly common reason for rejection.
Okay, so black ink. Noted. Critical detail. What about gel pens or ballpoints? Does the type matter?
Stick to a standard black ink pad if possible, or a permanent black ink pen. We've genuinely seen rejections because someone used like a blue gel pen. The FBI's imaging systems are strict. Black ink gives the best contrast and permanence.
Wow. Okay, what if the local police say no or you're somewhere really remote? Is there a DIY option?
Yes, there is. Option 3 is a mobile ink kit you can use at home.
Really? How does that work?
Basically, a kit gets mailed to you. It'll have an ink strip, 2 FD 258 cards, and instructions. The process usually involves pressing your fingers carefully onto a clean glass surface, like a table, to get the ink on, then rolling them onto the card.
Huh. On a glass table.
Yeah, it doesn't sound very high-tech, I know.
Yeah.
Less CSI, more kitchen science. But honestly, it can be surprisingly effective if you follow the instructions carefully. The key thing for CJIS, for the FBI, is getting clear, readable ridges. They'll accept home-rolled prints if they're usable. It's about the result, not how elegantly you got there.
Okay, so maybe after a bit of DIY fingerprinting on the coffee table, you've got them, you wrestled those prints onto the card. Now, how do you get them back to the U.S. safely without them vanishing into some postal black hole or getting stuck?
Right, the shipping part is crucial. First piece of advice, always use an express courier. FedEx, UPS, DHL, something like that.
Why not just regular mail? Cheaper.
Right. It might seem cheaper up front, but local posts, especially going internationally into the U.S., adds totally unpredictable customs delays. And the risk of it just getting lost is significantly higher. It's absolutely worth the extra cost for the tracking and reliability. We've seen regular mail packages get stuck for weeks, even months. One client ignored the advice, mailed it regular post, and waited nearly 2 months just for it to clear customs.
Oh, man, that sounds like a total nightmare. Customs can be brutal.
Exactly. So, second point, the customs declaration form on your courier package. You need to be very specific. Declare it as no commercial value personal identity documents.
Why is that wording so important?
Because if you accidentally make it sound like commercial goods, or if it's unclear, it can get flagged, held up, and potentially hit with import fees or storage charges. That declaration avoids unnecessary red tape.
Got it. No commercial value. Personal docs.
Right. And third, email the tracking number immediately to whoever is receiving it in the U.S., your channeler or service provider. That way, they can monitor its progress and jump on any delays or issues right away, sometimes even before you realize there's a problem.
Proactive tracking.
Okay.
So, print's done, shipped safely via courier, declared correctly.
Right.
They're heading back. What's the next big phase? Let's trace that document's journey through what the source calls the 5-step overseas apostille sequence. And let's talk realistically about how long it really takes. Official timelines can sometimes be a bit rosy.
You're absolutely right about timelines. But first, let's talk about a potential shortcut, using electronic reports.
Oh, how does that work?
Well, if the channeler you use offers e-delivery, definitely go for it. This means the FBI transmits a secure PDF of your summary directly to the channeler, often within just 24 hours of them receiving your prints.
Okay.
The channeler can then print this official PDF onto special tamper-proof paper and send that straight to the Department of State for the apostille. This cuts out the time it takes for the FBI to physically mail the report back to the channeler.
How much time does that actually save?
It can easily slice a week, maybe even more, off the total schedule. It's a significant time saver, especially if you're on a tight deadline.
A whole week. Yeah, that's huge. Okay, so assuming maybe you use e-delivery, or even if not, prints are delivered, what's step one in the main sequence?
Step one is basically gathering your originals to send in. So your 2 FD-258 cards, if you didn't send them directly from overseas, a photocopy of your passport, the channeler's order form, and your credit card authorization for their fees.
Right. Then you ship that package.
Yep. Step 2 is shipped to the channeler. Courier that packet to their U.S. address. Transit time, on average, is maybe 3 days from Europe, maybe 5 from Asia Pacific using Express.
And then the channeler does their thing.
Correct. Step 3 is receive the FBI report. Channeler processing is usually pretty quick, like 24 to 48 hours once they have your prints. If you did the e-delivery, they get that digital result basically the same day the FBI processes it.
Okay, then it goes for the apostille.
Exactly. Step 4 is submit for apostille. The channeler takes your report, either the e-delivered one printed out or the one mailed from the FBI, attaches the official application form, that's Form DS-4194, pays the $20 State Department fee, and gets it delivered to the Office of Authentications.
And how long does that part take? The government part.
Right now, the source material indicates the current federal turnaround time for the apostille itself is averaging about 20 to 40 business days.
20 to 40, wow, that's a big window.
Yeah.
And a long time.
It is a significant chunk of time, yeah. It fluctuates based on their workload. It's important to know that rush service options do exist, often through service providers who have specific arrangements for faster handling, but that standard queue can be long.
Okay, so eventually, after potentially 40 business days, it's apostilled. What's the final step?
Step 5. Final dispatch abroad. Once the apostille document is ready, the sealed envelope gets FedExed, or similar express courier, directly to your overseas address. That final shipping leg usually takes about 4 days door to door.
So, adding it all up, best case, smooth sailing, using e-delivery. What's a realistic total time frame?
If every single handoff goes perfectly smoothly, and you use e-delivery and maybe expedited apostille service, you might be looking at around 3 calendar weeks total. But that's if everything is smooth.
Smooth being the key word there.
Absolutely, because as we know, bureaucracy has its little traps.
Right. Let's talk about those. What are the hidden fees people don't expect, or maybe more importantly, the really common mistakes that could send you right back to square one, costing time and money?
Oh yeah, there are definitely pitfalls. On the fee side, watch out for those custom storage fees we mentioned. If your incoming fingerprint package gets flagged because it wasn't declared properly, it can sit there costing you like $28 a day.
Ouch.
So proper declaration is key. Another one is using an incorrect return label for the State Department. They will only ship the final apostille document to a U.S. address. If you provide an international return label, they'll often just return the whole package unopened back to the sender in the U.S.
Seriously, wow. So you need a U.S. address for that step.
You do, or your service provider handles it. Also, payment issues for the apostille fee itself. Sending a personal check that might bounce, that can kick your file right to the back of the processing queue. It's much safer to use a money order or have your service provider handle it via a prepaid account.
Okay, so customs declaration, return label, payment method. Those are big. What about mistakes on the actual documents?
Well, we talked about the ink using blue ink instead of black. That's an automatic rejection from CJIS. Not a maybe, it will be rejected.
Right, black ink only.
The other huge one is smudged thumbprints. It's actually the number 1 reason the FBI requests people to redo their prints. The source mentions an average CJIS rejection rate for poor quality prints is around 7%.
7% seems quite high for just bad prints.
It is. It shows how often it happens. Also, never use staples. Poking holes in the FD-258 card or the final FBI report, maybe to attach a photo or something, that invalidates the document. Punctures compromise its integrity.
Makes sense. You don't want holes in an official federal document. Is there a big mistake people make about where they send the finished FBI report for the apostille? Like getting the agency wrong?
Yes, absolutely. A really common one we see fixed is someone mailing their FBI report to their state's Secretary of State office.
Ah, because states do apostilles too, right?
They do, but only for documents issued by that state, like birth certificates or state police reports. An FBI report is a federal document. It must be apostilled by the U.S. Department of State's Office of Authentications in D.C. Sending it to a state office just causes major delays until it eventually gets rejected and sent back. Credible jurisdictional point there.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. Federal doc, federal apostille.
Got it. So, given all these potential bumps and the time involved, how can you, the listener, tell if a service provider claiming they can handle all this is actually reliable? What should you look for? Are there benchmarks?
That's a really smart question. Because, yeah, promises are easy to make. The source material does give some useful benchmarks. For instance, that average apostille processing time at the State Department.
Right, you said 20-40 business days is the standard queue.
Well, actually, the source notes that thanks to recent staffing increases, the average turnaround, even in the standard queue, is down significantly. It was maybe 18 business days back in 2022, but recently it's been closer to 11 business days on average. Oh, wow. That's much better than 2040.
It is. That 2040 is probably the safer, worst-case buffer, but the average is faster now. So if a provider quotes you something like 30 business days standard, you might ask why it's so much longer than the current average. It helps you gauge things.
That's a really helpful benchmark. What drove that improvement, do you think?
The source points mainly to increased staffing and some process improvements at the Office of Authentications. They've clearly worked to tackle that backlog given the surge in demand.
Okay. What else should people look for?
Look at their courier performance. The source mentions a provider achieving a 97.4% on-time delivery rate over 12 months. That shows consistency in the shipping part. And really importantly, check client satisfaction scores or reviews. The source cites a 4.9 out of 5 score from over 800 responses as a strong indicator. Knowing these kinds of benchmarks helps you compare providers and understand if their claims line up with, well, reality.
That makes a lot of sense. Numbers don't lie, usually. To really make this concrete, let's talk about Emily. You mentioned her earlier, the graphic designer in Seoul. How did she navigate this whole thing under pressure? It sounds like a classic case study.
It really was a perfect example. So Emily lands this great contract with a media firm in Seoul. But the work visa letter says she needs that apostilled FBI report in just 30 days.
Oof, tight deadline.
Very tight. And right away, she hits a wall. The local police in Seoul, they refused to print her on the FD-258 cards. So they didn't do that.
So option 2 was out for her.
Exactly. And this is where having that roadmap, knowing the alternatives, is crucial. A dead end with local police could have sunk her timeline if she didn't know about other options.
So what did she do? She didn't have 30 days to waste.
She went with option 3, the mobile ink kit.
The DIY option.
Yep. It was overnighted to her in Seoul, and apparently someone even walked her through the technique on a Zoom call to make sure her prints were clear enough to be accepted the first time.
Smart. Get it right the first time.
Absolutely. Her prints were received back in the U.S. just 4 days later via courier. And because they were clear, the FBI processed them quickly. The digital report was sent to the channeler just 36 hours after they received the prints.
Wow, that's incredibly fast turnaround from the FBI once they had good prints. So what was the final result? Did she make the deadline?
She did. 11 business days after the channeler submitted the report for Apostille, the final sealed apostilled document was delivered back to her in Seoul.
11 business days for the apostille part. That matches that faster average you mentioned.
Exactly. It landed on her doorstep 2 days before her immigration interview. Huge relief.
I bet.
And the outcome. Emily apparently now refers every new American hire at her company to the service she used. It just shows how navigating this successfully takes a huge weight off your shoulders.
That's a great story. Okay, let's wrap this up with some rapid-fire common questions, just to make sure everyone's really clear on the key details. First one, fingerprints again. What about those inkless live scan machines you see sometimes? Can you use one of those abroad?
Good question. It's tricky. A live scan abroad is only okay if that specific machine or vendor can actually print out the results onto a standard FD-258 card.
So it has to produce the physical card.
Right. Many live scan places outside the U.S. don't have that capability. Their systems might be different. So the safest bet, if you're unsure, stick with traditional ink. It avoids the risk of getting rejected for being in the wrong format.
Okay, stick to ink if in doubt. Next, notarization. We touched on this, but just to be crystal clear, do you need to get the FBI report notarized at any point?
Absolutely not. Zero notarization needed. Federal documents like an FBI report are self-authenticating. Adding a notary stamp actually messes up the chain of custody and can get the whole thing rejected by the State Department. No notary.
Got it. Loud and clear. How long is the apostille itself valid for? Does it expire?
The apostille stamp itself technically is valid indefinitely. It doesn't have an expiration date, and this is a big but, the agency requesting the document from you, like an immigration office or employer abroad, they almost always want the underlying FBI report to be recent, typically issued within the last 90 days.
Ah, okay. So the apostille is timeless, but the report it's attached to has a practical shelf life.
Exactly. So you have to plan your timing based on when you need to submit it. Don't dig out an old apostilled report from years ago.
Makes sense. Can you send the report directly to the State Department yourself for the apostille, or do you have to use a channel or a service?
You absolutely can send it directly yourself, mail it straight to the Office of Authentications. The main downside is that using regular mail puts you in the general public queue, which, as we discussed, can be slower just due to the volume they handle.
Right.
Service providers often use courier drop-offs or have systems that get documents into the processing flow a bit faster than waiting for standard mail sorting. But yes, direct submission is definitely an option.
Okay. And last question, the one nobody wants to face.
Yeah.
What if your prints do get rejected by the FBI? What happens then? Back to square one.
It feels like it, but not entirely. If your prints get rejected, usually for quality issues like smudging, a reputable service provider will typically send you a second fingerprinting kit at no extra charge.
Okay, these did.
And they'll usually escalate your file once the new, hopefully clearer prints arrive to try and minimize the extra delay. It's definitely an inconvenience, it adds time, but it's usually resolvable. It just highlights again why getting those prints right the first time is so important.
Definitely underscores the need for care there. Well, this has been quite a journey through the sometimes bewildering world of apostilled FBI checks from abroad. We've covered a lot, the huge demand, the core challenges, those remote fingerprinting options.
The shipping strategies.
Right, the whole 5-step sequence, how long it really takes, those hidden fees and common mistakes.
And Emily's story putting it all together.
Exactly. It feels like we've mapped out the terrain pretty thoroughly.
And the goal, really, for this deep dive was to give you, the learner, that map, to equip you with the knowledge to navigate this wherever you are in the world. It's understanding the precision needed, the security involved with these sensitive documents.
Yeah, the source really emphasized that security aspect too.
Because, as we've seen, even a small oversight can cause a big delay or problem down the line.
It's amazing how just understanding the steps and the potential pitfalls can demystify something that seems so complex at first glance.
It really is. And, that brings up a final thought to leave you with, something to maybe mull over.
Okay.
Now that you know the specific steps, the potential shortcuts, and the common traps for this particular document process, what other seemingly complex global bureaucratic hurdles might also have hidden pathways or proven roadmaps if you just know the right questions to ask and, well, where to look for the answers?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
This process might just be the tip of the iceberg for people living and working globally.
Could be. There's always more to learn, always potentially more efficient ways to navigate these things.